Good morning, everyone. We will now, that we've gotten quorum, start this meeting of the AVA Executive Committee. We will start with our roll call. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Great, thank you. Dublin. Oakland.
Here.
Alameda County. Pleasanton.
Present.
Albany.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our general public comment. Does anyone, I don't see any public in the room, I don't think. So does anyone online have any general comments for items not on the agenda?
Great. Isla Peters Paz, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Oh, cool. People can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Neat. All right. Yeah, my name is Ayla Peters-Boss. I am representing Local Clean Energy Alliance. I wanted to bring up again the topic of a Resilience Hub study session for the board and the Community Advisory Committee. We're happy to hear that the board wants to do a study session. On the May 15th meeting, the board identified a need for this kind of session. And I believe on the May 13th Community Advisor Committee, the CAC also expressed the same desire. This kind of study session would be really important for understanding the role of resilience hubs in climate and energy resilience. And at the June and July meetings, we also offered public comment on the importance of resilience hubs and the need for a study session. And at the July 17th meeting, Local Clean Energy Alliance formally extended an offer to work collaboratively with the board to design and implement such a study session. We appreciate AVA wanting to learn about community solutions to climate resilience. We believe that a community's ability to be cohesive and weather climate change impacts is directly tied to energy resilience. We really want to emphasize the need for community voices in such a meeting. We believe that these community voices would be a great asset to AVA Community Energy in learning about climate resilience and energy independence in Resilience Hub work. And we wanted to once again formally extend the offer to design and implement a study session in collaboration with the board and with AVA staff. And again, formally extension of that offer. This was also in a letter submitted to the board that I submitted to Adrian this morning. So if the board wants to go over these points again, they're in the letter.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do you have any further comment online?
Are there no further hands raised at this time?
Okay, with that, we will move on to item 3, which is our approval of our minutes from our June 5th meeting. Do I have any comments or questions from members of the committee?
So move to approve. Second.
Move in a second. Is there any public comment on this item?
Are there no hands raised at this time?
Great. With that, we have a motion. Can we please have a roll call vote?
Thank you. Oakland.
Aye.
Pleasanton.
Aye.
Albany.
Aye.
Minutes approved.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to public comment before we move into our closed sessions. Our closed session on conference with real property negotiators. Do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. Then we will move into closed session and come back for our other item to cover in public session. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
This is moving.
Yes.
Very good.
Next door.
Adrian?
Way next door.
I know.
Thank you.
You. Welcome back, everybody. We have returned from closed session. On item 6, I believe there is no reportable action from closed session. Great. And we will move to item 7, which is our resilience initiative overview.
Great. I'm JP Ross. I am Vice President of Local Development, and I will be discussing our Resilience Hub activities today. So if we could go to next slide, please. Thank you, Adrian. So just a bit of a background. Wanted to provide you all with an update of our activities to date. And we have been doing some different efforts over time, a couple of which have been focused on individual residential customers. So we are currently operating about 1,200 individual batteries connected to the grid through our Resilient Home program in a virtual power plant. So those batteries are dispatching energy into the grid during the afternoons, reducing our peak demand and our resource adequacy obligations. It's a small program. It is about 1.3 megawatts capacity that's provided. That was a program we launched in 2020 and have been working on with with Sunrun through a contract for provision of those services. We also provided some batteries, small portable batteries for medical baseline customers, low income customers. We gave away 50 of them and then provided an incentive for another 150, so about 200 batteries for customers on medical baseline. So those are a couple of the things that we've done in the past. We are also currently working on our Resilient Critical Municipal Facilities program, partnering with our cities to develop resilience hubs on existing city facilities. We've been working on that for a few years now, and are currently negotiating a contract with the counterparty. I'll provide a little bit more of an update on a following slide, but really building out resilience with our city partners on the buildings that you all have deemed critical to provide service during outages. And then, lastly, on the topic of community resilience hubs, investing heavily in our community resilience hub efforts through both community grants, technical assistance, and an incentive program that will go into in further detail. And just as a background, when we kind of started these efforts a while ago, it was really to support facilities through things like earthquakes. But more recently, it's the ongoing impacts of grid outages and public safety power shutoffs. So turn from like the hypothetical, what could this happen in 1 every 10 years, 1 every 50 years to, oh, it's happening quite frequently. And we have had 5 public safety power shutoffs in the last few years. Certainly there was very large PSPS events in 2020, impacting tens of thousands of customers, and we continue to have those events. Our last event was in July of this year, impacting 200 accounts. So it doesn't have to be some huge wildfire thing that creates a public safety power shutoff. They are ongoing and impacting our customers, creating some concern, certainly. Next slide, please. So a little more detail on our Resilient Critical Municipal Facility program. So this has been a concerted effort between AVA and our city partners, initially doing municipal outreach to define the sites that cities have deemed critical in your emergency response plans. So we worked with cities to identify lists of sites, created a storage framework based on individual building load for how much storage would be necessary to provide backup power, and then started working with cities to identify the cities that were interested in participating with AVA being kind of the central counterparty, being the buyer, so to speak. So we've developed a power purchase agreement that we vetted with our city partners, and gone out to market to solicit a counterparty who would kind of build, own, and operate those assets, and Ava will be the buyer of the solar and storage to the private sector developer, and then we'll be the seller of those services to our cities. Kind of standing in the middle provides cities with confidence, since you sit on our board and can require us to do the things that sometimes private developers in the private sector may want to step away from. And that's certainly been the experience of some of our cities who've engaged with power purchase agreements for solar assets. So having Ava, provide that procurement responsibility to our cities has been facilitated the discussion with city attorneys and city staff. So we are currently in negotiation with a counterparty by the name of Greenbridge, and we plan to bring that PPA to the board in October. It's our goal, and we're working with the city attorneys and your cities, with the 8 cities that are participating in this, to close the PPA by the end of the calendar year. And in this effort, we have applied for NEM 2.0 for many of these facilities to secure the financial savings for these projects associated with NEM 2.0. And we're very much trying to progress this, because the NEM 2.0 applications do expire in 2026. So got a bit of a cliff that we're working towards, and appreciate your efforts and all of our board members' efforts as we work to close this out. We have also approved $7 million to support this effort that will go into our solar and storage incentive program for projects that don't get NEM 2.0, projects that get that are on NEM 3.0. So we have some incentive dollars to help get that across the line. And right now there's about 61 sites that are in that portfolio across 8 cities. And we are excited to continue to progress this. It's been a bit of a hairy beast, to be honest, trying to wrangle as many cities, and as well, really the size of these projects. There's a lot of small projects. Small solar and storage projects are hard to get across the line. They're more expensive. And so part of the value of bundling these has been or part of our value has been in bundling these projects, so we can get projects built that a city wouldn't necessarily be able to build individually. But it also adds complexity to the process.
I would, just quick feedback, accelerate the timing a little bit.
Yeah.
because I don't-
Okay. Great. Thank you, Howard. Next slide, please. So on to our community resilience hub work and activities. So we've kind of broken this out outside of our municipal projects. This is for kind of community-owned, community-run resilience hubs. Broken this out into really 3 stages. Our first stage is through our community engagement work. So we have issued a grant to work with some community-based organizations on defining resilience hub needs and the use cases for this program, as well as going out into the community, doing focus groups around what the community is looking for, and then kind of ongoing site identification. So that's the first step. The second step is technical assistance, and then the third step is the solar and storage incentive program that we have brought to the board and had approved. If we go to the next slide, there's a little more detail on each of these steps. So on the outreach needs and evaluation, we did issue a community grant through our community investment grant solicitation through our community investment grant program in July, and that grant will be really focused on kind of the first effort of focus groups going into the community through public workshops to identify kind of case studies and existing resilience hub existing resilience hubs, as well as defining what is it the community needs and is interested in these resilience hubs, as well as kind of what is the eligibility criteria for receiving technical assistance, receiving incentives. So that's really going to be the focus of the first few months of work with the community-based organizations that we select. That solicitation closed on Friday. We did receive 2 proposals, so we're evaluating those now, and certainly they are both qualified. Our plan would be to fund both of those for $300,000 for 3 years. So there's the initial work, and then there's the ongoing work of kind of site identification and helping bring sites into the fold by doing, you know, continuing to do the outreach to the communities on kind of what the opportunities are for receiving technical assistance, for receiving the solar incentive program. And, you know, one of the main things that we have discovered as we've talked to different Resilience Hub programs, and we go through a few case studies in the next slides, is kind of that the eligibility criteria and the pre-qualification of sites is really important to get sites all the way through the process, right? We not only want to just identify area, you know, communities or potential sites, but we want them to get through our technical assistance program and then get an incentive and actually build a resilience hub. And so part of that is, what is the, you know, site characteristics? What's the site ownership? Is it feasible to install a solar and storage to provide energy resilience, you know, to that facility, to provide those services to the community who is going to be receiving those services, and the value of that resilience. So the goal of the community grants are to identify somewhere between 90 and 100 sites each over that 3-year term, so that we can kind of move projects through into the second and third stage of the program. So the second stage is technical assistance, and this is a $2 million program that we funded to provide kind of support, guidance through the process of identifying the desire to build out a resilience hub and what it actually takes to install the energy resilience solar and storage that would, you know, keep that facility up and running during a power outage. And so that you know, would be the development of some toolkits to provide that assistance, as well as things like evaluating bids. So solar and storage bids, we don't assume that a church or a food bank has the expertise to be able to necessarily evaluate those bids and understand the technology and the solar storage installers' capabilities or pricing, whether or not it's competitive or not. So we want to provide some assistance there. And then lastly is the solar and storage incentives. So providing solar and storage incentives for both the solar and the battery system. So in that, we've allocated sufficient dollars, significant dollars to that. I'll go through the budget in the last slide. So those are kind of the 3 phases of this resilient work.
Yeah, can I just elaborate on one piece? We're sitting in that phase 1 process right now. I think our rationale to do this as a sort of grant solicitation to find some partners is that we feel that we can make sure that we're gathering various community feedback. We've done some of that ourselves directly with CAC and Global Clean Energy Alliance and other organizations. So I think there's a good foundation of knowledge to guide the direction that we go in there and the types of criteria that we need to evaluate. And I think the next phase to sort of make that a little bit more robust is to work with some community-based organizations, do some more boots on the ground gathering, helping us manage some of the workshops, study sessions that have been flagged. I think one piece of feedback we'll look for from the board is how much does the board want to engage in that process versus obviously there's much data to gather there and then perhaps to present some results for feedback from the board, of course, before moving forward. And I think that feedback would then be informed by community needs, as well as to help really flesh out some of the complexities and nuances of, well, what's the eligibility criteria for what can actually seek this type of funding and support from us in terms of the types of organizations, types of services that they provide. And really a lot of the challenging aspects that we foresee are around, like, do they own the space? Is there some commitment to them having that space for some long period of time? How do they ensure that there's inclusivity in terms of how the services are offered, so that we can fund the right types of organizations that are actually providing the services more broadly to all customers, residences, businesses, things like that. And I think that's where things can get complicated, and we want to make sure we flesh out those details. So that's a big thing that's underway with the phase 1
Thanks, Howard. So the next three slides are really some case studies. So we have been looking at different resilience programs that are providing services to develop resilience hubs across the country and across the state. So Resilient Maryland has a program. I'm actually not going to go into the details here. The point here is we're looking at the case studies. We've been talking to the administrators of these programs to really understand what the best practices are, how to kind of, again, facilitate moving projects all the way through the cycle, understand why projects drop out, and also look at kind of how they are defining eligibility criteria for the resilience hubs, or what are the types of things that they're supporting, and what's the cost share associated with any grant dollars and incentive dollars that they're providing. There's 3 here. There's 6 or 7 that we've looked at, and these are some of the materials that we'll provide to the selected community grant partners to provide them background information, and we hope and expect that they would have some more case studies and things to bring to the table based on their experiences, but wanted to provide kind of a foundation of existing background work to the community based organizations who we give a grant to, so kind of starting on the same page. So if we go, Adrian, to the slide with the timeline. That one, there you go, thanks. So just running through the timeline now. So on the community grant work, we issued the solicitation for those grants in July. We just received 2 proposals, as I mentioned, and kind of through the end of 24 and into the first quarter of 25 is really where we will be doing the workshops, the community outreach, get the community feedback on the definitions and kind of resilience hub needs, so that we can bring that back to the board for real further depth and further clarification. What we would like to do is have that in place certainly by the time we launch the solar and storage incentive program, which is happening in the first quarter. So we're really kind of moving to that first quarter launch of the incentive, which we think is pretty critical to actually getting these resilience hubs built. We also have been going through a process of evaluating proposals for technical assistance and program management that we are going to be bringing in outside support on as well. So we'll plan to bring that proposal for a technical assistance provider as well as some program management assistance in October, as well as the proposals for the grantees that we plan to work with. So both of those will be coming back to you to the board in October for approval. We have our solar and storage program. As soon as we were given the remit to allocate funds for the incentive program, we hired a new staff person to help build that out. And we are then also signed our contract in July with the DERMS provider, Lunar, who's going to help manage all the batteries and help manage the solar and storage incentive program. We're also going to be contracting someone to help build out a manual for that program. And the goal is to launch the solar and storage incentive program later in the first quarter of 2025. And then with our community grant, our critical municipal facilities, as I mentioned, we're working to sign the PPA for that program and with the developer in October, and then sign the correlating city PPAs at the end of the calendar year. So rough timeline, really focus on the next 6 months on our activities with across these resilience hub efforts. Next slide, please. So just a review of the overall budget for solar and storage, and resilience is just upwards of $37 million right now, and about 14 is allocated and dedicated to resilience hubs. The community resilience hubs are built from the 600,000 in proposed incentives for the community grants, 2 million for technical assistance. And then, on the Resilience Hub incentive programs, about $11.7 million for Resilience Hub and care customers. But all told, significant budget now that has been allocated towards community resilience across these efforts. And with that, discuss it further.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any members with questions?
When is the, it's on this road chart thing here, there's the study session or sessions for the board and public? Is that early 25 that we're looking at?
Yeah, I think that's, so our efforts right now are gonna be focused on partnering with community-based organization who is gonna institute focus groups in the community around the community resilience needs. We can bring that back to the board in the first quarter of 2025. Board wants to have, facilitated sessions yourselves. I think that was part of the feedback that Howard was looking for. Do you want us to, go through this process, partner with community-based organizations, have them go into the community, understand the resilience needs and what the community is looking for, and bring that back, or do a session dedicated with the board on resilience hub needs?
And if I could just elaborate a little bit, we've done pretty good research initially on just sort of the types of case studies for different types of resilience hubs throughout the country, both staff, but also working with the consultant bars. And we've set some of the local community needs that have been communicated. So I think we feel reasonably well informed, but there is more information to gather. So that's part of doing this solicitation to partner with 3 community-based organizations that can further that analysis, confirm the definitions, the case study information, the types of services that are in need and that would be sought, depending on where those resilience hubs are throughout our territory, which could differ, of course. And I think for that community-based organization, we want them to assist in helping to run some workshops and study sessions, focus groups to gather that information. The question is, do we want to do all of that, synthesize that information, bring it back to the board, which I think would then define eligibility criteria for services that could seek incentives at the stepped up levels that we're talking about for these resilience hubs, and those that would be eligible to seek technical assistance grants, things like that. So types of organization, types of services, and then there's what are the sort of other underlying criteria related to, how do you have site control? How do you ensure that you're actually providing these services? So it's not on the types of services, but rather how will you manage those services? How are you funding those services? Things like that. So I think we can bring that back to the board as it relates to some of our incentive programs and technical assistance RFP to say, this is what we're proposing in light of the research that's been brought forward from the community-based organizations, and get that approval. That I think is probably a minimum that we would do. The question is, what in addition to that would the board want to be part of in terms of that study session, help defining those needs and services, eligibility criteria and such.
I think a lot of people on the board, or some at least, don't have that depth of knowledge that staff have, or that maybe a few board members have, and maybe some people in the community have. And I only thought of, I think the board needs to have a study session at some point before it makes some big decisions. And so if there aren't any decision points until sometime in 2025, then the study session could wait till 2025. But if we're going to make a big decision at the end of this year, I have no idea if we are, but then the board needs to have our study session before those big decisions are made.
Okay.
So it's a timing thing.
And the study session, just to confirm, sounds like it's more of, we've developed a lot of case studies on the types of services, the types of needs that we're seeing locally, and maybe some preliminary requirement information, really informational purposes
Yeah.
to be informed for then a decision to come
Yes,
later. As
right.
opposed to, we want to have an active discussion on what we think a community-based organization. I mean, we could do both.
Yeah, people will ask questions. Who knows
Sure,
what questions
okay,
people
yeah,
ask?
yeah.
But I mean, that's all. I just want to make sure that the order is study session or sessions of comprehensive nature, then major decisions, not vice versa. That's all.
I like where he's going, because that's exactly, you know, it's a significant number of dollars, right, 37.6, so, I think exactly the same thing, that the study session needs to be clear as to how you're eliminating, because some organization will be eliminated by some process, and your board probably being able to support staff's, criteria, and know it, so that we can, you know, because I think we all want it to be a success. I know we maybe are in the question phase, right? We want it to be a success, which means we can't necessarily do them all that may come up, right? So you're gonna eliminate, I presume staff would eliminate by nature of some criteria. But I think it'd be good that the board is aware of that, consenting to that. And that way then you could open it up to like a phase 2 if we ever decided to expand what qualifies as a resilience hub. But I think, as Member Calva said, I would need to know more early on.
Yeah.
And I think the CAC has to be involved.
Yeah, I think the bringing back the results of the community focus groups that are really led by the community-based organization
Mhm.
that we talk with around the kind of the needs and what is it that the community is looking for, that presents one side of this, which is what's the problem we're trying to solve and what's the level of interest and what are the types of organizations that want to be resilience hubs. So that's one piece. And then there's also a piece of, and what's the eligibility criteria and how do we make sure that we are spending the dollars wisely? Because every time we put a project into technical assistance, that's 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand, right? That's chipping away at that. And so to the extent that you need to kind of pre-qualify, there's certainly some winnowing in that process of, well, you don't, you know, there's this, the owner of the building has zero interest in participating in this. If you can't go and get the owner of the building to say, yes, I'm willing to do this, and it's a 20-year lease, or it's a 10-year lease, or whatever, or, you know, not willing to provide services outside of a very small, you know, cohort of members or customers or whatnot, like those things are gonna then be decisions we make to say what is eligible for the technical assistance and, you know, and the solar and storage incentive program. And so I think, you know, evaluating both of those things, bringing that to you all, getting the community feedback so that we can bring that to you. Because those are some of those decisions then, because when you're deciding what you are gonna do, you're by default deciding also what you're not.
Yeah, but Member Calv's right. Some members are not gonna have technical knowledge, right? And so we're gonna need staff's knowledge to, you know, bring us up to speed, right?
Yeah, we propose to bring that to you for discussion and action.
I think we have to think a little bit about how the CBO facility workshops and these study sessions aligns with the technical assistance RFP to ensure that we've fleshed out some of that eligibility criteria and the types of services that would be eligible. And also make sure we time it in a way that we can put some things in front of our board, which may mean accelerating a little bit of that work and also delays this other stuff in technical assistance. Maybe still solar storage stuff, but we can talk about that offline. I just wanted to flag that of threading that needle of making sure we have time to prepare information, present it, but also we want to rush to get the technical assistance grant available. So we could issue something earlier, so at least it starts to be available, and then iterate on it and refine it after getting more board feedback, or we could, you know, wait until we get that feedback and do it in a more comprehensive, more robust manner, but do it a little later. So those are things that we need to discuss. If there's any feedback now, happy to take it, but otherwise we can come back with a recommendation.
Any further questions?
No.
Any folks online waiting to give public comment?
Yes. Audrey Ichinose, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Audrey Ichinose, East Bay Clean Power Alliance and the California Alliance for Community Energy. It's pretty exciting that we're embarking on this. And as a kind of background question and a quest for information, I wonder if JP can make some generalizations about the kinds of critical municipal facilities that have already been identified. He mentioned 61 sites across 8 cities. And I wonder if he could say something about these 61 sites, just generally, you know, whether they're all police or fire stations or in whether senior centers are included in that. So that's a question I think we could all benefit from what JP can say. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Move any further?
There are no, oh, yes. Isla Peters, pause.
Yes, I guess of course, the board doesn't have to respond to this, but I'm curious because the amount of funding for the community engagement parts of the program are comparatively much less than what is being offered to technical assistance. And I guess, first of all, I wanted to highlight that. And second of all, I was curious what the back end decision making was on that part. And if Ava Community Energy views technical assistance as needing more of a haul, as being more of a haul than community engagement. Again, not just curious about the back end decision making on that, and wanted to uplift that because I think a lot of community members are also curious about that too.
Thank you for your comment. Any further?
There are no further hands raised this time.
Great, thank you. JP, if you can address the first question of what sort of critical municipal facilities we already have in the docket.
Yeah, I can, and I was just looking again for that pivot table that I built, but I'm not able to find it instantaneously.
Short list.
You had a short list, yeah, right here, right?
Yeah, so there's a short list there, but I don't have the number specifically of sites, but so there's, you know, fire stations, libraries, community center, food banks, police stations, city hall, courtyard, wastewater treatment plant. Those are the types of facilities. Again, they emerge from our city's emergency response plans. So we were like guided by our city's prioritization of what you all needed in order to provide emergency services. I think that definition and eligibility criteria is maybe a little different than a community resilience hub. And so, but those are examples of the sites that we are that are currently in the CMF.
Fairly broad and diverse set of facilities. that we're
Did you say
eligible for that.
schools in there? I can't remember if you said.
We
schools.
didn't do schools because we started with our member agencies where you sit on our board and then you represent Ava and what we can do with your city council, and school boards are comprised of different individuals. So I think that, you know, the opportunity is to potentially expand this out. But first we needed to like crack this nut with a set of folks who we had relationships with as far as kind of executing the contract, right? Like coming to that agreement was important.
One thing I also note is fairly inclusive and broad in terms of the types of municipal type facilities. Obviously, don't remember the exact concentration of what was heavier concentrated, but that was more driven by, I think, technical matters. On that second point of just sort of like, there's a lot of structural issues with different municipal buildings, as you can imagine, given their size, shape, age, roof, all those things. That was what generally drove the filtering and funneling process to what we've talked about here.
Can I follow up on that? I would imagine also the customization of it is unique for every building. No, they're not exactly the same across any of the cities, right? So there's where the technical element is required, I presume, right?
It is a historically very challenging segment of the space to do. They're small commercial and they're like snowflake builds, and you don't get the homogenization of like, you know, residential homes where they all just like, you're just slapping on 8 panels, like you can fit that in pretty easily. So it's a really tough space to do effectively.
A lot of technical work. So yeah, I can, so there's 6 city halls, 2 community centers, 17 fire stations, 3 human services, 5 libraries, 4 police stations, 7 public works, 4 senior centers. Example of types of facilities. So it is diverse, and each one of those is custom.
Mhm.
There's no one size fits all for those projects.
Great, thank you. And I don't know if you can briefly talk to the question on balancing sort of TA versus community engagement funding.
Yeah, I think the community engagement funding was, established at our community investment grant level. And, the goal there is really to kind of facilitate the community outreach, do the workshops and identify potential sites. And we're willing to fund multiple efforts to do that work. And then the technical assistance is kind of like, there's more dollars that goes into that, in that you're potentially sending an engineer out to a site to go evaluate the electric panel or where a battery will sit, what's the age of the roof. Again, these are things that we don't expect a church to necessarily have the capability to do. And so when you start spending the engineering dollars out there, which we did on our critical municipal facilities work, we know what the cost of that is, that starts to queue up. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of how that broke down.
Thank you for that summary. Any further comments from members?
Excited to start. Is Jack's Garage on the list?
Nope. But library should be, because Pleasanton's got the heat, and I think it's our cooling center, right? So as I think about the challenges you had, and you already hit it, but we're gonna have other areas that are gonna need it.
Yeah, I'll just agree with the discussion we had earlier. I think that would be good to get everybody on the same page, but overall, I think this looks great. And thanks for doing all the work to organize this whole big process. Good.
Can I ask one last piece of feedback, and we'll probably have to gauge the full board on this one, but
Mhm.
is there an interest to do a study session on a standalone basis, a special meeting, or to try to do a shorter study session within a working year subcommittee? Any direction on that?
I think you could use the CAC to do the detailed. Possibly see if the board could do a broader one. I mean,
Yeah, I think we.
It's just a timing thing, but let's have whatever thoroughness of study session we should have, for a special meeting, not a regular meeting.
Yeah.
And before whatever big decisions are made, that's all.
In the interest of making our regular board meetings more digestible and shorter, if we can do a special one, that'd be nice.
Okay.
Great. Any other feedback needed from us?
I don't think so. We're good.
Okay. Thank you all very much for the work on this. With that, we'll move on to item 8, committee members and staff announcements, including requests for future agenda items. Any from the board? Any from the public?
There are no hands raised.
Then we move on to adjournment. Thank you all for being here, and we will next meet the beginning of next month.
good to see you, Member Pat.
We'll get you out in time, Dan.
Right there.
Exactly, right on the wire.